Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, OnPay. Please support them so we can continue to share these stories. Today we have with us Maryellen Stockton, and she is with Work Well Wherever. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I am doing great. Before we get too far into things, tell us about Work Well Wherever. How are you serving folks?
Sure. So I started my company about 18 months ago, and we help small businesses and startups work well remotely. It's through a combination of consulting and training and group coaching.
And then how'd you get into this line of work?
Sure. So I worked for a remote virtual staffing firm years. And the team was fully remote, even though we were based in Atlanta, Georgia. And we also served people all over the U.S. and had contractors all over the U.S. And I fell in love with being able to have the flexibility to work from home, still contribute, and be able to pick up my kids from school. So I knew I wanted the same for other people. And I thought if I could help, small businesses and startups, who were thinking about working remote, or they wanted to start working remotely, meaning that they started with a remote first mindset, kind of helping them do that well.
So you've been ahead of the curve. So when this pandemic happened, probably nothing dramatic shifted in terms of how you do business, but the world shifted and they had to kind of adapt to this remote world. Have you been able to help some folks kind of get this right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the biggest thing that I saw, people would laugh and say that was great timing, as if I, predicted it. But I think the biggest thing being able to help here is knowing, there's not a quick fix. We were all thrown into this, or a lot of people were thrown into this. I had been doing this for a while. But a lot of companies were thrown into this remote working and just not knowing where to start. There's a place of like knowing where to start and getting all your systems and processes and people and things in the right place, but also having a long-term mindset, knowing that there is no quick fix for, having a great remote team. So there really is a process that you have to go through, that there's a checklist you can use to start, but it is an ongoing thing to actually continue to do it well.
So now what's some advice for these folks out there that are doing this for the first time? And maybe, they're at first they had to, like it wasn't something they had a choice to do, but all of a sudden now they have a team all over the place and maybe historically they've always worked together. Are there some tips that you can share maybe to help them kind of maintain their company's culture? And to, more of the softer things that people may not be thinking about when it comes to working remotely.
Sure. Because once they're, what I have seen, and I'm sure that you've seen as well, is this increase in, usually when you start your own company or you have a startup idea, or like myself, and you decide to work remotely, there is this goal of work-life balance. And maybe that's what you shoot for, instead of saying, like that's your why, right? Is this work-life balance? I mean, being able to have time with your kids or loved ones or whatever the thing is. And I've seen through this pandemic that people are actually not keeping that balance in check. There is actually a lot of overwork. So people are working 10 to 12 hour days because the vacations are canceled and all the world is, as we know it, is canceled. And I encourage leaders of small companies to still take that break, to be aware that like 10 to 12 hour days are not sustainable. And that is not the idea or why behind remote working. And then also to model and encourage that from your team. If your team is continually working on the weekends or working long hours, there's a severe threat for burnout. And so we need to be having those discussions and talk about, okay, if we're continually working late hours, then maybe it's time to hire someone new, or maybe it is time to shift responsibilities around to different team members if possible, but always communicating about the workload and making sure that you are taking that time off. Even if it's as little as your commute time that you normally had before the pandemic started, now using that to take the time off, to have the time just for you, because burnout is real, and it is not, it's just something to be aware of. And then I think, as far as I get asked a lot about creating culture and keeping your team connected as you work remotely. And that too has changed over the pandemic, because I would say when people are preparing to work remotely, you have your cadence of meetings is established, and maybe you have a time to meet up in person, and you already have these things that you do virtually as a team. But when everyone was forced to work remotely, we didn't have the little rituals and meetings set up to make sure that our team is staying connected. So it's thinking about what you would normally do at your office. If you celebrated birthdays or anniversaries or, big milestones, or if you had in-person meetups or team building, don't stop that. Just, you have to get creative on how we can do this remotely to keep everybody connected.
Now, how do you attack kind of the hiring aspect of this when you're not kind of maybe getting the opportunity to meet with someone in person? I can see on some ways it's a benefit, because now kind of the world is your oyster, where you can now hire anybody from anywhere. But the negative is it's sometimes, especially with young people, maybe recent graduates, it's hard to onboard them effectively without them physically kind of looking over someone's shoulder or being in meetings and kind of seeing kind of some of the nuance of the job. How do you help your clients handle this kind of remote hiring?
Yes. So, and that is a fun topic for me, because especially where I came from, working for a virtual staffing firm, you didn't get the opportunity to meet in person. So there are lots of tools and tricks out there now from a hiring process. So the hiring process changes slightly when you're looking for someone to work in a remote role. And a lot of companies decide that they are going to go remote for simply what you just said, that it allows them to hire people from all over the U.S., not just in their little small town, right? So it's an advantage, and that's why some companies go remotely to start with. But one of the things that I love to do is as part of the screening process, is have the candidates submit a video, like a 3-minute video recorded. So it's not a live recording, but a 3-minute video as part of the application process. And you just simply might ask, what made you apply for this position? And tell me something we don't know. It can be really simple, but that I have found screens out, it gives you a really good taste of their personality. And it also screens out the candidates that don't even really know what kind of job they're applying for. And then the second thing I would say, the second part of that is once you hire them and onboard them, I've heard this several times about, we can't really hire, or we don't know how to onboard because they need to watch, or there needs to be training. And again, I would recommend what your hiring process was. It's just being more intentional and adding creativity to your onboarding process. So maybe it was that you had them meet in person, and go through training and talk to different people. Well, now you can still do that online and use technology to your advantage. So it's having a really clear plan laid out for their first 2 to 3 weeks on the job, allowing them to meet with different people of the team, allowing them to meet with leadership. Maybe it's even setting up an online training that they can go and watch. There's a variety of different ways that you can do that. So I hope that people don't hesitate hiring because they feel like they can't onboard effectively if they're not face-to-face.
But it does require some kind of pre-planning, maybe that they either had this knowledge on how to onboard somebody in their head, but it wasn't really a documented process that they can kind of execute and replicate.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But it shouldn't, I think that should be a deterrent, because usually, even if they have the process in their head, you can take that process out of your head One of the tips that I've given is, if the process is in your head and you didn't have a formal process, just record yourself talking about what that looks like and have it transcribed. And then you're halfway there with your process. And then you just kind of tweak that for an online environment.
So now, is there any kind of looking ahead? Do you see any thing in the future that maybe having gone through this pandemic that'll help people, maybe a silver lining in the future based on what they've been forced to do in the present?
I do. I would be curious to hear what you thought too, but I do see a silver lining. Some people say, well, everybody, you've seen all these companies that say, I think Google just came out and said they're not going back to the office till July 21st. And so you see a lot of people saying those things. And I don't know if that's the case. I think we will see a mix of in-office and eventually in-office and at-home employees, with hopefully the rise of people knowing that there's a silver lining there, that you can do it well, and using technology to your advantage and not being that your sole way of communicating, right? So a little bit of creativity and stuff comes out of it. And I think people will be better prepared in the future, because we are moving so many things online, and it's been heading that way for a while. So I feel, I hope people's systems have improved and processes have improved, because even if you're in an office, we all need to, if I'm ever going to be replaced as, the founder of Workwell Wherever, or founder of any other company, then we need to have those processes documented so that anybody can pick up and move forward, with the business. So that's always the goal of any company. So I think, a highlight of this is actually preparing you to, well, whether you're in office or not.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right there, that this is maybe some things were on a back burner and you were going to get to it. Future you was going to get to it. And now it kind of forced your hand and you have to do it a certain way now. It's kind of accelerated that. And then now you're in it. So, there is no new normal. It just becomes normal.
Yes.
And, this is just the way that it is. So there's no sense in fighting it,
Yes. And it also, one of the fun things that I've seen with some of my clients is that it gives you a new starting point for how your clients engage with you and your business. So if you think about long term, maybe you still will meet some of your clients face to face if you eventually go back to the office, but maybe there's an added element that still allows for personal touch using technology to your advantage. It doesn't replace it, but it just enhances it. And since people have been forced to use the technology that's out there, I think that it can actually help your business.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's people are going to find that out faster, and they are. I mean, obviously it takes an adjustment and there's pros and cons, but I think the net positive is there. I think no one can really deny that.
Right. And when we're working, I have two children, almost 5 and 10. And so I also, tell people, like, this is not really working remotely the way that we know it, because that does throw a different, kink in the plans, trying to figure out the schedule when we think about going back to school or not going to school or having a mixed thing of that. It forces us to change our schedules too and get creative. And so maybe that's, even though it can be challenging at sometimes, I think that maybe that's helped as far as productivity, right? We have a short window to get things done while our children are preoccupied for a couple of hours. So,
and I think that it's increased people's empathy because everybody's in it together. This is a unique situation where we're all in this. This isn't just my company's having a problem or an issue. This is the world is. So we're all in it together, and we're all kind of understanding that, hey, a kid might walk by or my cat might walk across the screen. Like, no one is like embarrassed by that or like saying, oh, that's not professional. I think everybody knows that everybody's dealing with a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How has it changed for you guys? Or I would love to hear what do you think will be the positives that come out of this situation?
Well, for us, we had to change our whole business model. Our business model was in person in a studio doing face-to-face interviews. And we replaced that with more frequent virtual interviews that are coming out daily. And so we had to make a major shift in the way that our value proposition and in the way we deliver it. But we were able to do that fairly quickly. And I think that now this is the way it's going to be. We're going to always have now it'll be a combination of in-person in studio with some virtual thrown in.
Wow. Awesome. So do you have a home studio set up?
Yes, I do. So I have the same studio with fewer microphones at my house, and my business partner does the same thing. So we are able to each of us can do interviews remotely. And then occasionally we still have clients that are coming in the studio. We put up kind of these 2-foot high shields around each microphone so that you're in your own little kind of semi-bubble, not exactly a pod, but there is a barrier between each person.
Right.
And so we're just trying to make it work in the best way we possibly can. We're a small business with limited resources, not unlimited. So We're just trying to make it work and serve our clients to the best of our ability.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when you think about your long term, do you think that you will keep some of the same that's been going on, at least for the foreseeable future, right? Having a mix of in studio interviews and more interviews like this.
Correct. I think now this just adds a layer of service that we can deliver for our clients so that we can help them use our platform to help them achieve their goals now virtually as well as in studio.
Yeah, I love that.
So now for you and your work, does any story kind of come to mind where you've been able to work with somebody and maybe got them over the hump or taken their business to the next level from before they were working with you to after?
Yeah. So a lot of our, like I mentioned before, since it is a long-term, like I like to say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So a lot of the clients that I work with are clients that want to, either they've been now, pushed to, work remotely or to continue working remotely. So I have a lot of ongoing, clients that I've worked with and I'm still working with since October. But I think one of the things coming in is I worked with a remote first company, and when we first met, they were really having some challenges with like hiring and onboarding, maybe not hiring the right people and maybe not having the right things in place to actually build this community. So, and we're actually thinking about, not hiring remotely at all, like going away from a remote first model, even though they had been that way for, 10 years. So I was able to work with them to find them a couple of great hires who've now moved into leadership roles, someone who can, actually help the consistency as far as building a community along with the support of my ideas. And they actually gave up their co-working space that was an office for the founders. They actually gave that up in April, and everyone just now works remotely, and it's beautiful to hear their feedback and see their meetings and things happening and their team growing without having any office. And the hope is that I always tell people that it doesn't mean that you never meet up in person, that we think about these and we hope those things for the future. But right now they are really building a thriving team online.
Good stuff. Well, Maryellen, if somebody wanted to learn more, have a more substantive conversation with you or somebody on your team, what's the website?
Yes, it's www.workwellwherever.com. And also you can find me on LinkedIn under Maryellen Stockton, or email me at maryellen@workwellwherever.com.
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio. And remember, this work would not be possible without the support of our sponsor, OnPay. Please support them so we can continue to share these important stories.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com.